G'day viewers, and happy cheap chocolate egg day to you. I know some people place some importance on the Easter Sunday, but it's the Monday when all the Easter eggs are cheap, which is kind of special in my household. But look, speaking of unlikely resurrections, I've got one that's far more unlikely than any story in any religion, namely Tony Abbott. And there's one true believer with a resurrection of Tony Abbott, and that's Tony Abbott. I'm pretty sure it's a sum total of one, the people who think he can come back. And he's done it again. He's mouthed off. He's gone into one of the conservative Murdoch rags and going, here's an opinion piece. Here's Tony saying, here's my 5-point plan. Here's how to keep a conservative government in power. Because he said, oh, if you're not careful, it's going to be that other bloke, Bill Shorten. He's going to win the next election if you don't turn it around. Now, the too long didn't read version of this outlet of Tony's is pretty much the summary of everything that's ever come out of Abbott's mouth or pen. That's mainly Tony Abbott is full of shit. But there's a bit of fun to be had in dissecting what he said. Dissecting Tony Abbott, but not literally, because that'll get you in trouble, even though he probably deserves it. One of the fun things he said was he had a tough man-to-man talk with Finance Minister Matthias Cormann. See, Cormann had been a hardcore supporter of Tony Abbott's, but when earlier in the year Abbott mouthed off saying, oh, here's why I'm better than Malcolm Turnbull, even his die-hard supporters came on and said, shut the fuck up, you destructive piece of shit. And Abbott has said he had a man-to-man tough talk with Matthias Cormann where he basically said, hey, if you've got a problem with someone, you say it to them. You don't go and say it in the media. Wrap your head around that. Abbott, after saying he wouldn't undermine the government, went to the media to undermine the government, his own government, and then he says someone who responded in the media to his media statement did the right thing. That gives you an idea of what passes for logic and consistency in Tony Abbott world. Now, Tones insists he's not talking about trying to knock off Malcolm Turnbull, even though he hates Malcolm Turnbull with a passion and wants revenge. He says, no, that's not the way to improve in the public eye. The way to improve in the public eye is to do government better. Groundbreaking, I'll admit. There was nothing in his entire tenure as Prime Minister that suggested doing anything better was big for him. But hey, let's give it a break. Let's look at his 5 points. Now, his first point is reform the Senate to stop government gridlock. See, the governments of both persuasions have had trouble for decades. The Senate has to ratify laws and bills and budgets proposed by the government, and if the government doesn't have a majority there, that can be a bit difficult. And when minor parties get seats there, which they have been doing for some decades, it can be really difficult. You have to suck up to these minor parties, and it doesn't always work. But see, here's my problem with it. While the Senate is a long way from perfect, and the Senate voting rules are quite bizarre, how few votes someone can get and still get into the Senate is really quite bizarre. But when the Senate is actually designed to basically be checks and balances on the government, and someone who's basically proven himself to be an autocratic bully boy says, I don't think that barrier to government should be there, I'm not altogether inclined to agree with him. Second, he says we should dump wind power subsidies because that's pushing up the electricity price, even though that is basically the opposite of reality. And anybody who looks at the world today knows replacing dirty coal power with clean renewable power is of critical importance to, a tiny little thing called the survival of the fucking species. Pushing this incredibly narrow idea, I think if you didn't subsidise the development of renewals, we'd have slightly cheaper power today. Even though every one of their pronouncements about privatising power instead of keeping it in government hands has led to a doubling of power prices, even though every bit of his ideology is proven to be factually wrong, he doesn't care. He will push things on ideological grounds above actual real economics. See, while it takes a little while to set up a new industry, coal and other traditional forms of power have been subsidised and continue to be subsidised so much. It's an utter farce to say, oh, well, you shouldn't subsidise renewables. I mean, the government is at the moment talking about, oh, we should give this foreign company that wants to start a coal mine to make more dirty power, or we should give them $1 billion loan because no bank will do it because it makes no economic sense. That idea, get rid of renewables in favour of coal, is fucking moronic. His next point is defund nanny state bureaucracy. Hell if I know what that even means. It's just this general right-wing talking point. Oh, anything that puts any sort of limit on what any government or business can do, oh, that's nanny state. You don't want rules and safety. That's nanny state. It's an absolutely meaningless, blathering, right-wing talking point. As one, he's not part of the government, one of the senators who shouldn't be there because no one fucking voted for him, the so-called libertarian dude who's always going on about nanny state. It's just so bizarre. I'm trying to work out how to do a sketch involving him because when I was at work, if you work in an office where they have one of those instant boiling water taps for, you know, coffee and tea, this one has a sign about it saying, don't put your hands under the boiling water. And first I kind of thought, anyone who needs a sign to tell them not to pour boiling water over their hands probably isn't going to be swayed by a sign. But then it also just made me think of this libertarian idea of nanny state and too many rules. And I want to do a sketch with this guy where he sees that sign about don't put your hand under boiling water. He's so incensed. He proves what a free man he is by doing it anyway and has his hands jammed under boiling water, screaming, fucking nanny state, too many rules. All the flesh burns off his hand. You see why I'm having trouble working how to execute this, because I don't quite know how to do the burning flesh off hands without burning the flesh off my hands. But suffice it to say, Tone's third point, get rid of nanny state bureaucracies, is a fucking meaningless right-wing talking point. I'm actually going to read this off the page because it makes so little sense. I can't memorize it. I can memorize a sensible sentence, but not one that makes no sense, like protecting existing benefits for employees, but make it easier for future generations to get work. That is absolutely meaningless. That means nothing. It doesn't take a genius to know what Abbott's preferred form of industrial relations is. Basically, bosses can bend over and ass fuck workers anytime they want. Our workers have no defense whatsoever. So the idea of protecting anything is a fucking lie. And then making it easier to get work. How does that even work? It's like, oh, well, you know what? If we let bosses pay people $2 an hour, there'd be lots of jobs. And you think I'm exaggerating, but that's the actual type of talking point they put out. You get people like the person who's buying most of the Liberal Party's policy points, Gina Rinehart, the inheritor of vast mines which should have been in public hands, and it's an absolute crime that they were ever allowed to be in private hands and have billions of dollars of wealth ripped out of the country. Another story. But she's actually said, oh, well, you know what? When there are people in places like Africa who work for $2 a day, what hope do we have in Australia? These people are seriously putting slave labour as the benchmark for, well, you're not getting that, so what are you complaining about? So yeah, I think we can safely say Tone's view of industrial relations is complete bullshit. And his final point to turn the country around is, be proud of Australia. What does that even mean? This always blows my mind. I'm not allowed to be proud of Australia. You say that when someone pulls you up for being a racist piece of shit. What does that even mean? Be proud of what? In terms of places to live, I don't want to live anywhere else. This is my preferred place. I mean, yeah, you know, I just got dropped here as a baby, which, you know, I've got inertia stopping me from going anywhere else. But I've visited other places. I like other places, but there's nowhere I would rather live than Australia. I think it's got more benefits than drawbacks. But it's like, That code, be proud of Australia, is have white people in charge of everything. You're not allowed to say anything bad about the occupation of Australia, the attempted genocide of the Indigenous people, the destruction of the environment. If you say anything that's real but happens to offend conservative old white fuckheads, it's like, you're not proud of Australia. Well, I'm not fucking proud of you, you piece of shit. It's really bizarre when you look at it. He's going, I've got 5 points for getting this government back on track and winning. And it's absolutely vapid, empty talking points. And he talks about, I want to get rid of the Human Rights Commission. Oh, human rights? What are they? We don't need this. And they talk about, we've got to repeal 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act because free speech, when no one can point to any speech that has been impeded by 18C. They just can't, because 18D gives you all the justifications. Like, if you're not lying, if you're making fair commentary, you can say basically anything. But it's just code. It's like, oh, free speech means be racist as shit. So that's the summary of Tony Abbott's view of the world. Fuck anyone who's not him and doesn't support him. Ignore the fact he's lying and contradicting himself. Ignoring the fact there's no substance to anything he said. It's just empty, vapid talking points, but he knows what's right. Fuck that guy.